Thank you very much, my colleague, Dr. Abdulhameed Al-shuja'a, and thanks to you all in India, in the other corner of the world. I'm very much happy to see you today and presenting something related to translation. In fact, yesterday, most of the talks were about theoretical aspects of translation, and some reference was made to practice of translation. And today, I'm going to try to link between these two aspects of translation, which are theory and practice. And I'm going to take you directly to the classroom where these two things meet together in front of or in the presence of teachers and students. So my presentation will cover certain topics, as you can see in the PowerPoint. We're going to talk about, we're given some teaching methods. We're going also to talk about better research conducted and so the agenda, let's go back to the agenda. So introduction, definition of some basic terms, requirements of student translators, requirements of translation instructors, techniques for the translation classroom, and finally, we're going to draw some conclusions. So starting with the introduction, when we talk about teaching translation methods or teaching methods for translation, we may say that the research is rare in this area. We cannot see a whole book, a textbook for teaching methods for translation, neither research conducted in this issue, which makes it a challenge for translators, translation teachers, and translators. Is their best method for teaching translation, which is also a controversial issue, which also applies to the teaching methods of language in general. And according to Prabhu in 1991, he proposed what he called an eclectic method, where the teacher of translation or teacher of language should depend on different aspects taken from different methodologies, different techniques of teaching. The same applies to translation, where we have different methods adapted from teaching methodology of language, whether it is English or any other languages, and we can apply such kind of methods into the teaching of translation. Another question which also may rise is there best theory, method, or technique of translation to produce acceptable translations? That's also, I think, was the topic of yesterday's talks, where all the speakers mostly said no single method to produce an acceptable translation, where we can play with a variety of techniques, a variety of methods, so that we can work towards the final product of a translation. So having said this, let me go to define some basic terms. And the terms are translation or translating, teaching, and learning. So these are very basic terms, basic to translation, teaching. So the first question is, what does translating involve? Translating here, I'm using the gerund form to refer to the classroom process and to refer to the process that really takes place during producing or the production of a text from a source language into a target language. So in order to visualize the process of translating, we have to consider what really translation involves. So the first point is that, which is a general issue, that is transferring meaning from language 1 to language 2. And language 1 as it is clear to the source language. So that process of transferring meaning is the crux of the business of translation, where it involves a lot of things on the part of the teachers, on the part of the translators, on the part of students, translators. Again, when dealing with the source text and the target text. So that's why we're using a gerund form to express that it is an active process, interactive process, interactional process, where a lot of things meet together, meet to produce a final product that is appropriate in all aspects, in terms of grammar, semantics, accuracy, pragmatics, cultural aspects, audience acceptance, etc. So the other aspect of translation, which we translating, which we should consider, is that it is an active thinking and processing. Again, on the part of the translator, and the part of the teacher in the classroom, and the part of the student, again, in the classroom. So it is an active thinking and processing of the source text and its equivalent in the target text. A third point is that it is also a process of taking the right decision at the right time. Is it to choose this word or that word? To choose that phrase or this phrase? Is it to break up the sentence into chunks or leave it as it is? Is it to paraphrase the sentence to start from the end and make it at the beginning, or vice versa? That's why we say it is a process of taking the right decision at the right time. And it's really a hard work to translate. It is really daunting to do a translation task where you have to spare a lot of efforts physically and mentally. And this kind of process should also be transferred into the classroom. So let me go to the next point, which is relating to the translating. What does it involve? So again, it involves serving both the text and the reader. So we serve the source text to transfer to the reader of the target text. Sorry. And this is also a kind of another aspect, which is a demanding aspect of translation, how to serve. So we imagine you serve somebody. So you have to make sure that you make that someone satisfied with your service. So serving the text and the reader is also a kind of serving human beings to satisfy their desires and their needs. Then again, during this process of translation, we also have editing and revising, which is also a basic and vital step of translation, which can be done at the end of the task, sometimes in the middle. It depends on the type of the text and the type of the translation type. And finally, ultimately, seeking completeness of message in the target language. That means we make sure that the message is complete in terms of meaning and structure, in terms of ideas, in terms of culture, in terms of social aspects, in terms of we try hard to transfer the intended meaning intended by the writer, the original or the source writer. So these aspects, for me, and I think my colleagues share this idea, make the translation process. Now let's move into the second basic term relevant to today's talk, which is teaching. So a lot of people, a lot of teachers, they say, I explain a lot in the class, but students are not able to understand me. Now, teaching is not explaining. Teaching means the teacher has to be a dynamic person in the class where he or she has to guide and facilitate learning. So teachers, either in a language classroom or a translation classroom, should guide the students, the learners, and help them to learn. So how to do that? It is to create conditions what we call learning experiences that make the learning or that make the environment conducive to learning, where the learners are able to learn. The teacher in the class, either translation teacher or language teacher or any kind of teacher, geography, history, science, the basic job of the teacher is to create such conditions, such environment where it is really helpful for the learner to learn. And also providing feedback, which should always be positive feedback. Even the student makes mistakes or problems or struggles in producing an acceptable translation or acceptable piece of language, we should also be encouraging and positive, providing him with the right feedback at the right time. So then the teacher requires what, or the teaching requires the teacher to be helper, guide, facilitator, supporter, where everything is done towards the end of learning, or to help the learners to learn. This takes us to the other basic term, which is learning. How is it seen? Is it by just memorizing things? So it is acquiring knowledge or a skill. And so the learners should gain that knowledge and skill as a prerequisite for learning. And then we sometimes see a change in the learner's behavior, though it is a traditional term, a change in the behavior, but we can also say a change in their mentality, a change in their skill, a change in their abilities. So if we see that kind of change in their abilities, that we can say that there is learning. But if no change, no improvement in the learner's skills, abilities, then learning cannot be seen. Another aspect of learning, it is a kind of active and conscious focus on events that lead to learning, to acquiring knowledge.
Hello. Hello. Dr. Abdulhameed Al-shuja'a, there is a problem from your side. Could you please manage that? Hello. Sana University. There is a problem from your side. We can hear nothing. Could you please manage that?
Sorry, can't you hear that?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Go on, please.
Okay. There is a problem in the capacity of the voice. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Yes, you can go on.
Go ahead. Okay. The last aspect of learning is what we call the ability of the learners to transfer what they have learned in the classroom into real life situations. So if the learners are able to do this, then we can say confidently that some learning has been taken place. So having said this, defining the basic terms, teaching, learning, and translating, let's move now to the requirements of student translators. And again, this is common sense that they have to have working knowledge of both languages, L1 and L2, and they have, again, working knowledge of translation theories, methods, and techniques. And also they should have good access to good dictionaries, both general and specialized ones. And also they should have some knowledge of the domain they are doing the translation in. So legal, business, medical, media, etc., knowledge of the text types, or sometimes you call them genres. Also, once we consider the translation process of the teaching process of translation, we should also consider the requirements of translation instructors or trainers or teachers, whatever they might be. So they should have the linguistic and extra-linguistic knowledge of both L1 and L2. So the linguistic aspects of the language of the two languages, also the context, the environment, the cultural aspects, the surrounding conditions, all of these make up the linguistic and extra-linguistic knowledge of both L1 and L2. They also, translation instructors should also have translational knowledge and experience to deal with texts. So to deal with text from the point of view of translation. Which method to be used, which technique to be used, etc. And also a third aspect of their knowledge and their experience, those teachers of translation should have pedagogical knowledge and experience to deal with learners, because we are going to deal with text and minds. So unless we have these two types of knowledge or these two types of experience, I think there will be a difficulty dealing with both text and minds at the same time. It's not like teaching a language only. It is teaching now two languages. It is teaching two languages at the same time, as well as teaching the skill of transferring meaning between these two languages. And that's why it is a demanding task, a daunting task for the translators and teachers of translation. And that's why these three basic requirements should be there in the any translation instructor or teacher. Once we have done this, let's now move to the classroom. Am I about? So,
Hello, Professor Abdulhameed Al-shuja'a. We can hear nothing from your side. Hello, Sanaa University. We can hear nothing from your side.
I hear you well. I hear you clearly.
Oh, yes, I hear you. Go on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. Go on.
Can I continue? Okay, so let's move now to the classroom. And this classroom is a place that tells us what happens for the translation process. What happens? So I look at the classroom as a place where theory and practice meet. Theory of translation and practice of translation meet. They meet and share ideas, share knowledge, share techniques, share ways of matching each other, ways of sorting out any tension between them, and ways of compromising between theory and practice. And that's why we say translation classroom is a place where these two things meet. It is also a place where we can have lots of negotiation of or for meaning that takes place in the classroom. And this is, in fact, a term adopted from task-based learning, where there is a kind of negotiation for meaning. Students negotiate for meaning in a language classroom. We can adopt the same thing into the translation classroom, where we can also negotiate meaning between the two texts, between the translator and the text, between the teacher and the students, etc. The classroom is also a place where the journey of translating, the journey of transferring meaning between L1 and L2 becomes visible to the translation learner. We know once we go to the classroom of translation, students feel afraid of translation. They feel that it's a difficult issue. It's a challenge for them. So once the instructors who have good experience in translation can transfer that journey and make it visible to the learners, to make them feel it, practice it, etc. So once we have said something about the classroom, let's now move to the techniques of or possible techniques of teaching translation, and I have made them of three types. Language-oriented techniques, which include analysis of the source text, paraphrasing the source text, discussing nuances of the source text, negotiating of meaning or for meaning. The other aspect of the other class, translation-oriented techniques. So number one, language-oriented. Number two, translation-oriented techniques, which are related to linking theory to practice, conscious application of translation techniques. So whenever we move into a sentence or a structure or phrase, we have to think which technique is possible here. What do you think? Is it literal? Is it adaptation? Is it modulation? Why? Why do you think so? Can't we? Can we use this? Can we use both? Can we use three? So it is a kind of this conscious application of translation techniques helps the learners or the translation students to be aware of what they are really doing, what is really translation. Also, the third technique is producing more than one acceptable translation, again, to give the translators a feeling and to give them confidence that we can have 2, 3, 4, 5 acceptable translations. There is not only one translation, which is a holy translation. No, that's wrong. So this kind of encouragement also helps them to understand more and more and become more applicable to more able to translate. The third class of techniques is pedagogy oriented techniques, encouraging individual, pair work, group work, etc. Writing sample sentences on the board and the screen to discuss the problems, encouraging peer evaluation, providing immediate feedback for individual learners, providing feedback for the whole class. All of these are pedagogical techniques that helps to achieve good results in translation classroom. Let's visualize. Let me now conclude. Let me visualize the classroom scene in this diagram. See the diagram. This is the diagram where we can see the classroom. So we start with the source language analysis, paraphrasing, negotiating meaning, working on the first draft, discussing translation problems and challenges, providing feedback, individual, pair, group, etc. And then we finally produce the final draft of the target language text. So this is the thing that we should do, or we should proceed on doing in the classroom. So to conclude, we have some conclusions. Number one, teaching translation is not an easy task because it requires three things: translational, linguistic, and pedagogical skills. We should also make the learners live and feel the activity of translation. How do professional translators do in the class, in their daily life, in their professional life? That should be transferred to the classroom. Authentic material should also be used as much as possible in the classroom to transfer the learners from the classroom atmosphere into the realities where they have lots of problems, lots of difficulties. Other conclusion that could be made is corrective feedback is vital for the translation class. Developing learner awareness of translation methods and techniques while translating is also a must. Also, preparing learners to use all possible ways to convey the intended meaning is also something valid and something highly required to make the learners or to make them able to produce a text in various ways, And finally, focus should be equally made on the process and product of translation. So we shouldn't only be concerned with the product, we should also give equal emphasis on the process, what really happens during the translation process. So
hello, sir. Hello, sir. Oh, we cannot hear you. We can hear nothing from your side. I think there is range problem from your side.
Now we'd like
now we hear you. Okay, go on.
Yeah. Now for 5 minutes or 10 minutes max as maximum, we'd like to invite the participants if they have any interaction with the Professor Abdulhameed Al-shuja'a, who has made an informative lecture about the techniques of teaching translation and the process of teaching translation, which involves how to transfer the meaning from one language into another. And he highlighted the fact that a translator could be a servant to two masters. So you would be in a dilemma whether to satisfy the master of the source language text or the target language text. Second, then he moves to talk about what does teaching mean, and he gave an, as I said, informative feedback or information about teaching of translation, which is not an act or an act of explaining to the students, but an act of facilitating and guiding the process of learning to the students. Then he talked about how learning is seen and the requirements of novice translators, that they should be well versed in linguistic and extra linguistic skills. Then he talked about the techniques, and he classified the techniques of teaching translation into 3 points: language oriented techniques and translation oriented and pedagogical oriented techniques. Now, if there is any question, you can ask Professor Abdulhameed Al-shuja'a.
Hello. Hello. Do you hear me?
Yes,
dear audience, actually now everyone can unmute him or herself, and if you have any question, you can ask.
The capacity of the voice is not clear.
Now, do you hear me now well?
There are some questions in chat box also.
Yeah, great. If there are some questions in the chat box, Dr. Ubaid will read them.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, go on.
Okay, go on. You first ask. Okay.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for the wonderful lecture. This is Adya. I'm a student of MA Translation, JNU. So, since I joined a bit late, I'm not sure if the extralingual techniques that you talk about, you've already elaborated on or not. If time permits, could you please elaborate on the same?
Can you repeat the question, because the capacity of the voice not clear? Or next,
Okay.
can you write the question so that we can understand, because it's not clear?
Yes, sure. The extralingual techniques I'm talking about, I'll write it in the chat.
Okay.
So let me read the question written by Dr. Polisati C. Vishwanath. The question is, sir, which should be given more importance? Is it language oriented or translation oriented or pedagogical oriented translation?
Which one should be given? Okay, thank you for this good question, Mr. Speaker. In fact, we should focus on these 3 aspects, on these 3 classes of techniques, which are language-oriented, translation-oriented, and pedagogy-oriented, because we cannot work with one only. Translation, teaching cannot be achieved without having these 3 classes of techniques. Because language, that means you have to have a good command of both languages, and you have to transfer this kind of command into the learners. You have to clarify to them the aspects of the points of differences between the 2 languages, the points of similarities, the points which may create challenges, etc. And then pedagogical, how to deal with human minds, how to deal with students. The translator and instructor should have some educational background, some psychological background, where he or she should deal with them in a humane way. The third one, which is translation, that means a basic and prerequisite knowledge of translation theories, techniques, and methods. So without all that together, we cannot do any translation teaching. I hope the answer is the question is answered well.
Thank you very much, sir. There is another question from Adi Adya. The question is, could you please elaborate on the extralingual techniques, please? On extralingual techniques, please. Okay.
Thank you. Extralinguistic techniques or knowledge means that it's not enough to understand the grammar and the vocabulary of one language. We should also understand the cultural aspects of that language, the contextual use of the language, the social use of the language. We have to think of the source. This source text. Where was it written? To whom it is written, and why was it written? Because these 3 aspects will help the translator to transfer the meaning into the target language perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Any others? You are free to ask questions. You are unmute yourself and you can ask the questions, if any.
Okay, Professor Abdulhameed Al-shuja'a, I have got a question here.
Yeah, one
You hear
point.
me? Yeah, this is Isa speaking to you. Dr. Abdulhameed Al-shuja'a, as you have mentioned that, translation is not an easy task at all. It's a challenging task, and that's true. And translation is a matter of problem solving and decision making. And when we teach students, to make decisions, because sometimes when we translate, we will have a lot of options, and we need to select one option, and that is called decision making. How can we teach that, especially when it comes to culture, situational equivalence?
Put it in writing. This is what I said earlier, that the capacity of the voice is not clear. So any person would like to ask, should put it in writing. Any question?
No, then we can go to the next paper presenter. So go on, please.
We'll move to the second speaker.